My name is Carl Svensson, and I'm going to talk a little about PHP protocol handlers and some weird stuff they can do. So yeah, my name is Carl Svensson, sometimes called Zeta2. I'm a master's student at the Royal Technical Institute in Stockholm, and a CTF player for the Swedish team HackingForSoju. This is my first conference talk, and yeah, if you would like to reach me afterwards, there is some contact details there. So first, let's talk about opening files. We have different opinions on like what languages can do, should do, and so. But I think opening files is a central part in any programming language. And I think that it should be like a very simple operation. Basically, just pass something down to the operating system to get a file handle back. Maybe, depending on your language, you want to allocate some buffer or some supporting resource. But overall, I think this should be a simple operation. If I would guess, you could like implement something in 10 to 30 lines of code, and yeah, for example, the glibc fopen is 22 lines of code. So yeah, that would be reasonable, I think. Let's talk about PHP. PHP has a lot of features, and it seems like you can do anything anywhere. Yeah, and this also applies for opening files. So in PHP, you can, of course, you can just open simple, regular local file system files. You can also open files over HTTP, include them, and I think that's that's maybe okay. You can also do things like opening a CLib compressed file and just treat it as if it were a regular file. And so this is where I think it starts to get a little too advanced for just opening files. And also, if you try to open a CLib compressed file, which is not actually a CLib compressed file, I think the reasonable thing would be to throw an error or something, say that this is not CLib compressed, but PHP says yeah, okay, sure, I'll just read it as a regular file then. So you can also, if you have a zip archive, you can open a file inside the zip archive as if it were a regular file with this syntax here. So you specify the archive name, the hash, and the file inside the archive. So now we will read from f.txt as if it were a regular file on the file system. Kind of strange. And then, as if this wasn't enough, you can do things like open this file, but all data that you read from this file should first be passed through this function before you pass it on to the rest of the code. So this is where it gets really strange. It feels like this kind of feature has no place in a simple file open operation. Okay, so this is a lot of strange stuff, but what implications does this have? How do we use files in PHP? You could just open a file, read stuff, write stuff like you do in any language. But I think the two most common operations in PHP when it comes to files is either to just read all the contents of the file and return it as a string. Maybe sometimes that's used for serving up images that you need to add certain headers to and stuff like that. And the other thing you do with files in PHP is also the include and require function, which is the way you modularize your programs in PHP. And that's a good thing. You want to do that. But what you really should think about is that what include actually does is basically this. You take the contents of a file and you evaluate it as PHP code. I mean, this is not a problem if it's a hard-coded file, because that's just saying I want to use this code. But the problem, of course, arises when this parameter can be manipulated by the user. So this shows up in both CTF challenges and in actual production code. So first, let's go to like the first example where this can go wrong. This is, I mean, I've shortened this example a little bit, so you probably wouldn't find something exactly like this, but something basically like this. You can have some kind of website which has a parameter which says that, yeah, I want to see the about page. And then inside the code, it would be something like this. Take the parameter, slap on a .php and include it. So this means that since include can open any file that fopen can open, not just regular local files, you can do just a simple remote file inclusion. Of course, people have realized this, and we have added like security options like allow FURL open to prevent stuff like this. But that also feels like an afterthought, like a bad patch to a severe problem. So for the next example, this is from a CTF challenge. This is from a competition called CodeGate, the qualifiers, which was earlier this year. So we wanted to, there was a web challenge, so we wanted to exploit this website, and we wanted the source code of the site because that makes exploiting much easier. So this website basically had this function, like you could view a page. So usually it would be like index.php page equals like home or upload, I think, because this was like an image uploaded site. So what we did was we added on this, which basically says take the index file, pass it through a base64 encode and read it. So later in the code, they add a .php, so this becomes index.php. We include it, and we will get the whole index.php outputted as base64 encoding, since of course a base64 encoded text will not be evaluated by the PHP interpreter and just passed on as output. So, and then we could do this for a few other pages, and then we had the full source code of the website, which made the next step much easier, which I will come back to in a later example. Yeah, so here is some actual production code from one of my teammates. He provided this. He was doing a security audit for a customer. So basically they had one host name, and they had two servers, and this was one of the servers which hosted images. So the original code would do something like, I mean, there was some other stuff before here, but essentially it would get some parameter from the user, extract the host schema, and make sure that it was HTTPS and im.customer.com, but they made a mistake. This should be an OR, it's an AND, which means that we only have to fulfill one of these two requirements. And then there is another problem here, because if we pass this thing as input, it will do this parse URL function and try to extract the host and the scheme. So the scheme will be this, no problem. And it will claim that this is a host name, which seems very reasonable, because if it would have been HTTP here, then this would be had been a perfectly valid HTTP URL in which this would have been the host. However, in the context of opening a CLab file, this is just a path. So this would here try to get the contents of this file, And so it would go into the non-existing directory img.customer.com and then up again. But that's not a problem because it does path normalization. So these two parts cancel out, and we only have index.php left. So it would try to open index.php as a zlib compressed file, but it's not, of course. But yeah, that's not a problem because it will still read it as a regular file. So basically, we would output the index.php file. Yeah, and there would probably be some image header and whatever, but you could just read out the source code. So that was a pretty bad security issue. And yeah, hopefully they fixed it. Anyway, so these things keeps happening. So this was from actual production code. This is from the other part of the CodeGate qualifier challenge, where so basically it was, as I said, it was an image uploading site. So you could upload images. It would check that it was a valid JPEG image, and then it would give you like a random ID for that image. So we could take some PHP code that we wanted to execute, zip it up, and then we prepended a valid JPEG file. And as you may or may not know, if you concatenate a JPEG file with a zip file, both of the files are still valid because zip files are typically read backwards, and the JPEG file has an end of file marker. So when we upload this, it will pass the JPEG validation check because it is a valid JPEG image. And then we could go back to this index page and provide this URL, which basically says that we want to open the zip file in the upload directory, which we had then extracted from the source code that we got earlier. And this was the random ID we had. And so this was our uploaded JPEG file, and the %23 is the hash sign. So this would say, take this zip archive, randomid.jpg, and inside that zip archive, give me shell, and they added on the PHP here. So include the PHP code in this zip archive and execute it. So there we had remote code execution, and then we could get the flag and solve the challenge. So this was when I was preparing this talk, this was a quote from one of my teammates, which I liked because it feels like there are so many strange advanced features in PHP. This was one of them. So just summary. PHP is still messed up, and eval is still evil, so you have to think about what include actually is. It's you're evaluating code from a file, so make sure that the user can't affect the path in any way. And there have been, as you've seen in some of these examples and other examples where you find this, you try to filter things like you shouldn't have this in the path, don't have this in the path and stuff. But small bugs, stuff breaks. So yeah, that was all I had. Thank you.